Hey, I'm Kevin, and this is HFX by Bike, a channel all about getting around Halifax by bike. It's spooky season again, so I've picked a scary topic for today's video: Halifax drivers. Well, not the drivers specifically, but more about how we design our roads and how that impacts the choices the drivers make. At higher speeds, drivers have more things to keep track of and less time to react to unexpected events. As a result, high speeds are associated with a higher collision risk and a greater likelihood of those collisions producing injuries and fatalities. That's why Halifax, just like many other cities in North America, has started lowering its speed limits in some of its urban and suburban neighborhoods. There's just one catch: a lot of driver behavior is dictated by the design of the road, not the signs alongside of it. But what does it mean for a road to set the speed? The more space that is available to drivers, the faster they tend to go, as they perceive that there's a lower risk of them hitting something. This shows up across the traffic management literature looking at lane width, but my personal favorite example is actually my own backyard. Whenever deliveries get made to the grocery store below my apartment, a truck shrinks the driving space down to a single, narrow lane. When there's a very real risk of scraping paint off the side of your car or losing a mirror, drivers suddenly decide this is a place they need to slow down and be more attentive. To see if this relationship between driving space and vehicle speed holds more generally for Halifax, and hopefully make the idea more concrete, I downloaded traffic study data from the city's open data platform. This includes location data for where the traffic studies have been done, how fast cars were going during the observation window, and in the event that there were multiple studies on the same street, I limited it to the most recent one. After limiting to city-owned streets on the Halifax Peninsula and its innermost suburbs in Dartmouth, mainland Halifax, and Bedford, I captured the data. This included things like the width of the roadway, the number of lanes, and the amount of street parking present in both satellite imagery and street views. I was blind to vehicle speed while doing all this, so as not to be able to influence the results. I repeated this process for each of the 604 streets identified, which created a database representing just under 1,200 lane kilometers of road, or a little bit over a quarter of the Halifax Regional Municipality's entire road network. Getting right into the results, we see that a 1 meter increase in lane width is associated with a 3% increase in vehicle speed, which equates to about 1.5 kilometers an hour. Of course, not all road space is actually usable. Some streets, especially on higher density neighborhoods, have nearly wall-to-wall street parking that knocks off most of a travel lane on each side. Past research has shown that street parking occupancy can have strong effects in reducing vehicle speeds, so I took my assessments of street parking usage and subtracted a city standard parking lane worth of space from the road width estimate based on the amount of heavy parking on each side. After taking into account actual parking usage, the association between drivable space and speed gets a bit stronger. An increase in drivable lane width of 1 meter is associated with a 7% increase in vehicle speeds, or about 3.1 kilometers per hour. Unfortunately, among the streets in my analysis, only 18% were appropriately sized. 16% were slightly too wide, and the remaining 66% were wider than any conceivable use needs. The minimum width for a transit lane is 3.3 meters, but we've built 2/3 of our traffic lanes to be wider than even the largest vehicles on the road need to travel at full speed. In practice, we've unknowingly upgraded most of our local streets into collector roads and collector roads into arterials. Oops. Of course, all of this doesn't come cheap. Just including the streets in my sample and ignoring the parking lanes where people actually bother to park in them, there's enough extra paved space in just the urban center and the inner suburbs to run a 2-lane road wide enough to accommodate transit all the way from downtown Halifax to Sheet Harbor. This 129-kilometer road doesn't move any cars, isn't used for parking to any significant degree, and at the city's current expensing rate of roughly $13,000 per year per lane kilometer of road, would cost something like $3.3 million per year in upkeep. The actual cost is likely quite a bit lower, since by volume, most of this dead space sits on lower-cost local streets. Ultimately, though, this is still 129 kilometers of what is essentially anti-traffic calming infrastructure that we get taxed to upkeep every single year. We then get taxed again by the city when it tries to build traffic calming infrastructure on top of the streets, built to maximize speed. It gets worse. According to the city's own Red Book, its design guide for building out infrastructure, if we had to do this all over again, we would. Right-sized roads are technically allowed, but they're at the absolute bottom of the range. Even our still under construction neighborhoods still use the same wide road designs we're currently spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on traffic calming infrastructure to try to rein in. Fixing the problem of our oversized roads is a big project, but meaningful steps can be made at low cost and relatively quickly. The single biggest issue is that we combine multiple unrelated goals into the design of our roads. Many of our streets are built extra wide not because we need the space to move anything, but because we want to leave extra space available for street parking, often in places where there's little to no demand for it. Fixing this means updating our design guidelines and differentiating between the part of the road made for moving people and the part made for storing cars. Instead of having a broad range of lane widths be permissible because they may or may not include street parking, set a target width for lanes based on the intended purpose of the street. Here's an example of the concept from Toronto. If a road is going to be carrying high-frequency transit, lanes should be about 3.3 meters wide. If there's no transit, or if transit frequency is low, they can be 3 meters wide. Local streets can go even narrower. We already have several streets in the city where the actual drivable space drops down from 2 lanes to 1, and it's fine. Local streets aren't supposed to be fast. The process of retrofitting existing roads depends on how much extra space is available. In some cases, where the street is only a little bit overbuilt and there's not enough extra space to do anything useful with, just paint an exclusion line down one side or in different sections on both sides. Fill in these the next time the street gets redone. This is just an interim solution, but it's cheap, quick, and works to visually narrow the street. In contrast, some of our roads are extra. This is Parkland Drive in Clayton Park. It's a 2-lane major arterial with a speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour, although speed studies show that drivers routinely hit almost 20 kilometers an hour over that. Coincidentally, it's also overbuilt by about 40%, even taking into account the moderate street parking usage. Fixing something like this isn't so much about visually narrowing the road as it is figuring out better uses for all of that excess space. Here's how much space is needed for a 2-lane transit-compatible road, and here's all the extra space left over. The street parking on Parkland does get use in some sections, so I'm going to shift the traffic lanes to the western side and place a single parking lane to the east with a planter to make it non-traversable by traffic. There's still a lot of extra space, and this is a bike channel, so I'm going to throw in the city's widest 2-way bike lane on the eastern side of the road. Note that aside from the planter, an interim build with this design can be done essentially just with paint. Most of this can be done almost overnight for very little cost. The point of this isn't to advocate for one layout or the other, just to show how much extra space there is on some of our roads and what you can do with it with even the smallest amount of imagination. In a very real sense, every meter of road we build is an investment by the city. We're spending about $26,000 a year for every kilometer of a 2-lane road. In theory, this is always in service of improving mobility and helping people get around the city easier. Historically, we've overbuilt our roads and created street parking as a byproduct. The road and the parking are the same asset from a financing perspective, and if you take nothing else away from this video, I hope you can appreciate just how much all of this extra space can add up in terms of the land used and the amount of tax money spent. So, if we successfully disentangle the part of the road that moves people from the part that stores cars, should we still be paying for the latter through general taxes? I would argue no. I think every parking space should have a cost recovery mechanism attached to it. This can take the form of meters or permit parking, or if we want to keep it free to the user, we can institute something like the transit area tax rate for on-street parking. In case you didn't know, if you live within a kilometer of a transit stop, you pay more in property taxes in Halifax. The same could work for on-street parking, where, say, each space on the same street adds to the tax bill. In this way, whichever option applies to any given set of street parking, the people paying for its upkeep are primarily the people benefiting from its presence. And those have been some scary facts about our roads, and what you can do about them. I recommend checking out the relatively new book, Killed by a Traffic Engineer by Wes Marshall, if you find this video in particular interesting. And of course, if you like this kind of thing, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.